Alrighty, evening everybody. We're going to start with our monthly review and test, chapter 308 from Halakha number 21, because there's quite a lot to cover, only an hour in which to cut. We are going to follow our usual pattern of going through mainly the principles, and then door, gate, Wendy.
In the YouTube video, just like.
So we are going to focus mostly on the principles, and we'll give some relevant examples. But the problem when it comes to relevant examples is that the examples of everyday life that the Shulchan Aruch gives are not the same examples of everyday life that we would give. So I don't see a point in focusing too much on the details of what it was like living in the 1500s when our details are quite different. So I'll focus on the principles. Now, we start with what I mentioned. Stones are the worst kind of muktzah for two reasons. Reason number one is they serve no purpose, and that level of eitzim v'anim is a bad level of muktzah. You can't even move it for a good reason on Shabbat. Something like a pen, a klisha melachto li'isur. So even though that is muktzah, it's not such a bad level of muktzah. It's not such a strict level of muktzah, and so you can move it if you have a purpose. Whereas stones, you can't. That's one problem with stones. The other problem with stones is that stones don't easily have a purpose. Whereas other things like palm branches easily have a purpose, stones don't easily have a purpose. So if you want to designate stones for use on Shabbat, what do you have to do? So you've got to designate it for a purpose forever, he says. That's the idea. He quotes the different opinions on it. But again, the question really comes up. If you're talking about something that is sometimes used, if you're talking about a stone that's sometimes used for X, Y, Z, then it's enough to designate it for this Shabbat. But if it's not sometimes used for this thing, then you need to designate it forever. There's a discussion as to whether you would need to do an action as well. And his conclusion is you don't need to do an action as well. It's sufficient to designate it forever when you're talking about a stone.
Do you still have the English?
We do. It's over yonder side. We're on chapter 308. Mark.
That's before Shabbos, you say.
Before Shabbos.
That stone forever.
Exactly.
I'm out camping.
Yes.
And that night just before Shabbos.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden the wind came up, the rain came up, and now this thing's going to blow away and have a bang.
Yes.
Can I go and grab those stones that I never designated?
Yes.
Stones, put it down as the weights.
You want to do it on Shabbos? On Shabbos is going to be a big problem.
I have to have a bad Shabbos and my tent's going to blow away.
Possibly. You could look into what if it's going to be Tsar Gadol or these kinds of things.
No danger,
you know.
it's just going to be a wet Shabbos.
I'm saying Tsar, right? If it's going to be in pain, you're going to be in pain because of it. So you could look at those kinds of other factors. In other words, can you break the laws of muktzah in these emergency situations? It's a good question, but that's the question. The question isn't, do the laws of muktzah apply? The answer is yes, the laws of muktzah apply. The question is, can you break the laws of muktzah because of this emergency situation?
And the laws of muktzah are only rabbinical.
Correct. Although the Aruch HaShulchan says the laws of muktzah are stronger, he says the rabbanans of Shabbat are stronger than normal rabbanans. That's the way that he puts it. And he says because the rabbanans of Shabbat also come from Har Sinai. Now, exactly however you want to understand that, but he just makes the point. We're not playing with the rabbanans of Shabbat. Was there another question or point?
I was just going to ask what chapter.
Where are we?
Chapter 308, Halakha number 23.
Thank you.
Pleasure, treasure. The next one we see is the branch of a tree we spoke about as well. That is one step better than a stone. On the one hand, it's just as bad as a stone because it's the worst level of muktzah. On the other hand, it's better than a stone because it's often used for another kind of purpose. It often is designated or repurposed for Shabbat. So that's why it's enough to do it just for this Shabbat. And he goes through other examples. You've got flax or wool that you want to use for a bandage. So if you do some way to designate them as a bandage Erev Shabbat, that's going to be good enough. And now he goes to the question of leather, dried leather. Are you allowed to use that? So, well, sometimes we sit on the dried leather, use that as like a kind of a cushion. So again, I don't want to go through all the examples one by one, but the idea is this something that is normally used or that could be used quite easily, or is this something that's like, no, that's really quite a wild idea to use that? And when I say wild, I don't mean like it's crazy, it just isn't done. Coming back to the stone, yes, you could use a stone as a paperweight, but when was the last time you went to the garden to get a stone for a paperweight? So, because it's such an unusual thing to do, it requires that strong level of dedication. And he goes through as well examples of sawdust, and it depends on the kind of sawdust. Some people tend to use their sawdust, some people others don't tend to use their sawdust. Okay, what about bones, animal bones? Are animal bones muktzah?
Yes.
Well, he says it depends if they are usable for dogs. If you are in a place where you have dogs, or you'd use those for dogs, and they wouldn't be muktzah. I'll give you an example. When I was at yeshiva, Rabbi Ziegler's father used to learn there most afternoons and evenings. I think he still does, and he would join us for dinner often. And if we had chicken, then afterwards he would always collect all the chicken bones. And he had a whole lot of dogs in the neighborhood that he used to give them the bones and make sure that he was taking care of them. So even on Shabbos, that wouldn't be muktzah, because those were bones that were going to go to feed dogs, whatever. They have a clear, easy use and purpose. What the Shulchan Aruch is going to say in a little while is that it all depends on the realistic availability of those animals. In other words, if I have a kind of peel, let's say nachi peels. I've got nachi peels lying around, and old nachi peels. And I say, yes, but nachi peels are the favorite food of the Manchurian panda bear. Okay, but we don't have Manchurian panda bears over here, and you're not going to feed any Manchurian panda bear. So that doesn't take them out of that status of being muktzah. It's got to be the kind of an animal or whatever else that actually is in that area. Listen.
Let's say you don't have an animal, but you're going to give it to someone else's animal. Does that count?
That does count.
But what happens if you're going to give it to the person after Shabbos? Wouldn't that be preparing for after Shabbos?
It's a good point, but the point is that since it is fitting for an animal, it's like food. It's like you got butter. You want to move the butter around. So even if you're fleishich, butter is not muktzah, because butter is food. So it's the same thing over here. Since this is food, since this is animal food is not muktzah because it's animal food. So that's the question we're asking: is this animal food or is it waste? If it's waste, then it's muktzah. If it's animal food, then you can throw it away. Then you can move it around, do whatever, because that's not muktzah. Raw meat, he says, is not muktzah because some people eat raw meat. That's what he says. And even if it's rotting raw meat, it's not muktzah because you can feed that to dogs. Yeah, he's talking about when it's still moist, pre-biltong. But yes, I've got a friend that I once bride with him, and while we're busy braaiing, he starts eating the meat off the braai before it's cooked. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, no, that's how I grew up. We all did that. We all eat the meat, before it's cooked on the braai. He said, okay. However, it's got a source in halakha. That's what he said. Okay. Salted fish, you're allowed, but raw fish is no good, and not even animals eat raw fish, he says. Now, again, this will all depend on your time and place and situation.
Bears do.
He's giving you his examples. Sorry?
Bears do.
Yes. He's again, if you're in a place where you regularly feed the bears, okay? He's giving you his examples, and we've got to come up with our own examples if we understand the principles. An amulet, right? A kameya, a special Kabbalistic formula. So you go to the Kabbalist, and he writes you an amulet that'll do X, Y, or Z. So if it's like a proper approved amulet written by the greatest Kabbalist of the generation, well, then obviously that's not muktzah. If it's a amulet written by a regular Kabbalist, and we're not sure if it works or not, so that is like an in-between status. You can't take it into Reshut HaRabim, because maybe it's not really a proper amulet. But it's not muktzah, because we treat it a bit as if it is an amulet. Interesting kind of scenario. Sorry?
What about a fake
And
diamond ring?
So fake diamond ring is still jewelry. I mean, you can have costume jewelry. Costume jewelry is normally worn and whatever else. If it's the kind of thing where it wouldn't be, okay. Okay, so now he says, then he comes on to the other point we mentioned to him in Chamariv, which is things that are disgusting. So this is, as I said, a special heter in the halacha. This is called graf shel re'i. And this is probably the kind of thing that would come up in the test. FYI. Graf shel re'i basically means like a pile of dung, or something of dung. And the idea is that even though that would normally be 100% muktzah, coming back to Mark's scenario, the rabbis were sensitive to normal cases in which the laws of muktzah would make your Shabbat unmanageable. And they didn't want the laws of muktzah to make your Shabbat unmanageable in normal cases. So going away camping, that's somewhat of an unusual case. We don't spend too many Shabbatot camping. But especially in the days before plumbing, having disgusting things around in your home that needed to be moved. I mean, for example, you guys know what a chamber pot is, right? So it's like a potty, basically, right? Except for adults. So you would have a potty in the room, and now you'd want to take that out. But it's muktzah. So technically, it would be muktzah, but the rabbis made a heter that it's not muktzah, so that you could get it out of the room. That if something's like genuinely disgusting, get it out. If it's outside or if it's in a room where you don't have to use, so then you can't go and clear it. So it's specifically that kind of heter. However, if you're worried that the kid's going to get in there and make a mess with it or something, so then you are allowed to. So it's a very practical halacha. Even though you're allowed to take out the chamber pot, you can't bring it back in unless you first put water inside or something like that. In other words, unless you kind of clean it out. But you can't bring something not so nice back into the room on Shabbat. Okay, yeah.
I think Rabbi Brett said that the reason why you can't bring it back is because you're chucking it in Shus Rabbi and you can't bring it back. What's this kind of purpose?
Let me see.
Didn't you call it right? I might be wrong.
I think you should apologize. Okay. I don't see that. I think it's more that you don't have it goes back to kind of the muktzah state. You now you now have something that's muktzah, and you don't have the heter of you clearing your room from something gross. You're bringing something gross into the room, so you're not allowed to do that unless you've washed it out, whatever, so it's not gross anymore. Okay, you are not, and that's what he continues in the next halakha. You're not allowed to make something gross in the room with the intention, oh, it's fine, I'll just take it out later on. You're not allowed to create a situation where you make something muktzah in the room, but then you come up with a reason why you can move it out. However, if you did do that, you are allowed to take it out the room. And in a case, he says there's even times when you're allowed to make a trick. So the trick goes like this. I have something gross in the room, but I'm not going into that room. But I want a reason to take the gross thing out of the room. If I'm not able to bring that gross thing out of the room, I'm going to lose money. Now, I'm still not allowed to take the gross thing out of the room because it's like my guest room or whatever. This is the example. In your guest room, you've got something gross. If I can take that gross thing out, if I don't take that gross thing out, I'm going to lose money. But right now, it's muktzah and it's not bothering me. So what I can do is I can say, oh, I'm going to go sleep in the guest room. Oh, no, I can't sleep in the guest room. There's something gross in there. Oh, I'd better take that out of there so that I can sleep in the guest room.
Then you have to sleep in the guest
I
room.
think you do have to sleep in the guest room, yeah.
Well, then either way, you're going to lose
Well, the
money.
bed in the guest room isn't as comfortable as your bed.
So that's the decision. That's the decision you have to make. But that's the example that he gives. That even though you're creating an artificial situation in which now you have to do it, you're not normally allowed to do that. But in a case where you'd lose money, otherwise you are allowed to do it. Okay. Then he says another thing you would want to do is you'd want to bring in some earth and then use that over the course of Shabbat. So you put it, you take some earth and you put that in a corner and you use that to cover up various dirt or this or that. That kind of thing would be fine as long as you made it clear and designated it in that area. And then it's like the palm branch; it's the same kind of idea. Now he says you're not allowed to move animals around because they are muktzah. I just want to speak about animals being muktzah. When he speaks about animals being muktzah, what he really means is like farmyard animals. He doesn't mean pets. What's the difference between farmyard animals and pets?
The ones
You don't
behave.
play with farmyard animals.
Good. You don't play with farmyard animals. A pet basically is a living toy, right? Whereas a farmyard animal is like just something that works. It's like a crop almost, right? It's not a living toy. It's a living sheaf of wheat. And so you relate to them differently. You don't go over to a sheaf of wheat and stroke it and play with it and who's a pretty sheaf of wheat, right? Whereas with pets we have that kind of relationship. So when the Shulchan Aruch is not speaking about pets, it's speaking about farm animals. So farm animals have the halacha of being muktzah. The pets are not muktzah. Okay. Now when it comes to these farmyard animals, now you want to get them from one place to another. So how are you going to get them from one place to another if they're muktzah? So the answer is you can't pick them up and carry them, but you can
Shove them along.
pick up part of them and move, and kind of guard them. Take a dog by the scruff of its neck and guard it through, right? So that you're not carrying it, you're not really moving it, it's really moving itself, but you're guarding it in the place where it's moving. Now, you can't do that in all situations. The general rule is you can't say, well, I'm moving this part of the cell phone and not that part of the cell phone, therefore it's not a problem of muktzah. Normally the rule of muktzah is if you're moving it, that's a problem. However, when it comes to these animals, we have the concern of tsar balechaim. If you don't move it around, you might end up causing pain to the animal, that it's not in the place where it needs to be, it's not where it's going to get its food or whatever else. So because of Tzar Balacham, we were more lenient on the laws of Muktzah, and we allowed you to move this animal around, for example, by the scruff of its neck. However, when it comes to animals like chickens, where by doing this, the thing would actually jump off the ground and you would be carrying it, then it's going to be more problematic. So then you just give it a shove from behind. And again, it does the walking or the moving, you're just kind of shoving it along. The same kind of thing that it says a woman can shove her kid along in the Reshut Harabim. Kid wants to take her kid to shul, obviously no Eruv, having trouble getting there. So she shoves him little by little. She can't drag him. What she should do is she can actually move the legs of the kid, right? Like one leg, other leg, one leg. You're talking about like a toddler over here. You can do something like that. Because then he's always standing on his one leg. You're never carrying him. You're just kind of assisting in the walking, right? You know the difference between walking and running? Is that walking, the technical definition. Walking, you always have at least 1 foot on the ground. And so for speed walking races and all that kind of thing, that's the rule. If you ever have both feet off the ground in speed walking races, you're disqualified. So you've got to always have 1 foot on the ground. So it's the same kind of thing over here. As long as the kid always has 1 foot on the ground, then you're never actually carrying him. You're only assisting him in his walking. You're only kind of pushing him along and helping him to walk. Yeah.
What happens if he falls over? I don't know, pick him up.
You can pick him up. You can't carry him. Yeah, Reshut Harabim, the problem is carrying. The Mishnah Berurah does point out that when you're talking about a child, even if you would pick him up and carry him, you would still be patur. It wouldn't be aser doraita, you would still be patur, because we have halacha chai noset atzmo. A living person carries himself. So even if you would properly carry this kid, that wouldn't be considered a doraita, but it would still be aser, and therefore you're not allowed to actually pick him up and carry him, but you can do this kind of helping him put 1 foot in front of the other. Then the Mishnah Berurah says, and this is quite important, again, dealing with places outside of the Eruv, you can't drag the kid along, because that's considered like carrying him. And he says, the Mishnah Berurah says, it seems from Rashi that you couldn't even drag or carry a kid in a karmelit. Now, I understand why you can't carry a kid in Reshut Harabim, because even if you say chai noset atzmo, it's just one derabanan. But a karmelit, you could say, you got 2 derabanans, chai noset atzmo, and it's only a karmelit. So then maybe you could do it. So he says from Rashi, it seems that it's a problem. However, there are those that are lenient in dragging the kid. However, to carry him on your shoulders, everyone agrees that would be forbidden in the karmelit. But some would be lenient in dragging a kid along in a Carmelit. So again, you can think of a maybe more a socially acceptable way of doing it than actually dragging this kid along the ground. But to find a way that he is still on the ground, he's not, picking up and carrying, he is still on the ground. Not going to come to shul if they can't get their kids to shul. This is something good to know. But as he says, to carry them is no good. There are some people, he says, who carry their small children on their shoulders with no eruv, and more, and it's in a karmet. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, there's a mistake. This is still a derabanan, even though it's a karmelit. However, you don't have to go around telling people this, because definitely they won't listen to you. And it's better that they should be shogegin and not mazidin. It's better if they're going to transgress this anyway, let them transgress it not knowing that they're doing something wrong, rather than knowing that they are doing something wrong. However, if he actually can't walk, if he's still too little to walk, then almost everyone agrees that this is a real problem. Now he says, what about having a non-Jew move the child around in a Carmelit? So he says that would be fine, because that's already a step removed. So for a Jew to carry the kid is a problem. But for a non-Jew to carry the kid in Rosh Hashanah, that's not a problem. Okay, and then he says, however, if you're carrying a kid and the kid's carrying a bag, then that's definitely a problem. Because even if you're not chayav for carrying the kid, you're chayav for carrying the kid's bag. So that's the important. I think a very important Mishnah Berurah. That's chapter 308, Mishnah Berurah number 154, Kufnun Dalad, and that's really where he's dealing with, what to do with children outside the Eruv. I do know of a community where they don't have an Eruv, where the rabbi permits people to carry their children to shul on Shabbos. Not like the Mishnah Berurah, right? The Mishnah Berurah says you can't do that. This rabbi said, no, you can carry your children to shul on Shabbos, and using this idea of it's a Carmelit and Chayin Noseh Atzmo. So presumably you would have to say that he found an opinion that didn't agree with the Mishnah Berurah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Then he says, if something, you're allowed to touch muktzah, you're just not allowed to move muktzah. So again, this power bank, for example, is muktzah, but I could do this on Shabbos. That wouldn't be a problem. That would be a problem. So an egg is always a good example. You can't touch an egg on Shabbos because you're going to move an egg, a raw egg, I'm saying. But but other things which are not necessarily going to move, right? A car, right? You can't touch a car on Shabbos because it's not going to move. Yeah.
Eggs do have a use on Shabbos. You can throw them at people.
Thank you, Yohid. Okay. The next one is, can you move muktzah by blowing it?
Yes.
Why?
Because you're
Not
touching
direct.
it.
It says muktzah, the way Rabbi Goldfein put it to me, muktzah is a gezerah on your hands.
I think
If
that's
it's not your hands, it's not
touching
muktzah.
it.
Yeah. Broken, something that broke, you are not allowed to now use those broken pieces to do this or that, whatever else. All those broken pieces are considered muktzah. Okay. Now he says, you're not allowed to play on Shabbos and Yom Tov for the ball, says the Shulchan Aruch.
That's a hectic one.
Yeah, he says whether it's a paper ball or a wooden ball. Why doesn't he say like a plastic or whatever?
Didn't exist back
That's
then.
right. So you're not allowed to play with a ball because he says it's not considered a kli. It's considered muktzah. It's like a stone. It's like a rock, and it's completely muktzah. You're not allowed to do it. However, the Ramor says actually we do permit it. Now, firstly, if they're talking about like a wood or a paper ball, they're not talking about something that was manufactured for use as a ball. So if the whole problem is it's not considered a kli, you couldn't say that with our soccer balls. Our soccer balls are manufactured for use as a ball. The Ramor does permit it, and the Mishnah Berurah says, the Ramor says there are those who permit and the customers to permit, And the Mishnah Berurah says, well, maybe the reason is because it was made for this and it's designated to do this all the time, so therefore it's not considered muktzah. Now, obviously, everyone agrees you can't play soccer outside of an eruv. He says because then it's going to end up going more than 4 amot in this domain and whatnot. On Yom Tov, you are allowed to play outside the eruv. Even according to this opinion, but this is all when you're playing on like a court or something like that, not playing on the ground. But if you're playing on the ground, there's the additional problem of what?
Taking out grass?
No, he doesn't actually mention that. He mentions that you might end up smoothing the ground. Now you can debate whether you would do this with soccer. I don't know sports well enough, whether you do soccer or cricket or that kind of thing. But some are concerned that if you play these things on like a ground, then you might end up smoothing it out.
And what about grass? Isn't there another problem with grass?
He doesn't mention that here. Is it possible there's another problem? See, I would say it's not a psik ratio. It's not for sure that you're going to end up uprooting the grass.
For smoothing the ground, but that is applied to astroturf or something
No.
like that.
See, astroturf, you're not going to end up smoothing the ground. Astroturf is like already an artificial surface that's over there.
So I've got two things. First of all, there's well, actually what would they use balls for in the what else would they use like plastic and wood balls for?
Paper.
Doesn't it say
They would use them for games.
for play? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But-
what would be the problem with that?
He says because it's not considered a kli. Yeah.
We see Manny's also muktzah.
See, money's an easier one to understand because see the key word that I use when it comes to understanding these things is utility. Utility means you can actually utilize it. It has a use. It has a purpose. You can do something with it. A pen, you can do something with it. You can write with it. Stender, you can do something with it. You can put a book on it. Money, we never do anything with money. The only purpose money serves is as a symbol of value. We trade it, but we never use it. We don't say, give me a 5 rand coin, I need to pay for that, I need to give it away. So money has no utility. It has value as a symbol, but no intrinsic utility. If you take foreign money, it's not worth anything. That's as an example. Stand on a desert island with a whole lot of money. It has no utility. So with money we could explain. With a soccer ball, it has a utility. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't seem to say, well, something created for play, it might not be considered that that's a purpose. The Ramah certainly seems to say that it is, which, makes sense. It does have a purpose. That the purpose is kicking it around. Maybe we'll say it's not a real purpose. Okay. Now, there was this thing that people wanted to carry silkworm eggs in their armpits. Now, why do they want to carry silkworm eggs in their armpits?
To hibernate them.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if hibernate's the right word. What was the right? Incubate.
Incubate. Sorry.
To incubate
That's what I
them.
meant.
Yes. They would want to incubate them, keep them nice and warm, and then it's going to start making. So the Mishnah Berurah says, no, you can't do that. Number one, it's going to be carrying. Because you're not allowed to carry these things. Firstly, they're muktzah. These eggs are muktzah. And number two, you're going to cause them to hatch. Now, what's the problem of that? What's the problem of causing eggs to hatch? Sorry?
Nyland.
Nolad, that's clever, because it is, making something born. Yeah, so that's not really, Nolad is really changing something from one form to another or something like that. Some want to say it's Durabanan, but the Dirshu notes quote the Shevet Halevi, who says the problem is makeh b'patish. Because you can't do anything with the eggs, but with the silkworms you can already do something with them. Okay. So the question they raised in the Dirshu notes as well is these kinetic watches. The idea with the watch, it's got these little weights that as you move it, it charges the battery. Right? Talking about analog watches. Right? But as you move it, it charges the battery. So he says, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says that If it's not working, you're not allowed to do it. In other words, if it stopped because it's run out of battery, and by you moving your arm, you're now making it work again, that you're not allowed to do. However, if it's already working, you're allowed to do it because you're not doing it intentionally to charge up the
But
battery.
you're making it work for longer.
Yeah, but that's not your
We had a problem
intention.
with this with Eli's watch, because Eli's watch doesn't work like this. You know, but Canon said you can't wear it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. He quotes. He quotes the Dirshu notes. Take a look over here, just for future reference. Take a look at another point. It's note number 167, and he quotes Rav Shlomo Zalman and also Rav Elyashiv that as long as it's working, then you can carry
It's
on.
in the Mishnah Berurah.
Mishnah Berurah doesn't go into the question. It's the Dirshu
Oh,
notes.
okay.
I mean, they quote also the Chazon Ish and this and that, but it's a machloket achronim. It's a machloket achronim over here. Yeah. Okay, good. Next halacha. Are you allowed to move a shatner's garment?
Some say
Good. Some say yes, some say no.
Just 168.
Well, no, this is Mishnah Berurah 160. It was Dirshu note 167.
Oh, okay.
Mishnah Berurah 160. Some say you can move shatners because it still is clothing. Some say you can't move shatners because it's forbidden clothing. Good chakira. Okay. Then he says you have this waiver on Shabbos to chase away flies. You are allowed to do that. Then like a broom you're allowed to use. The Rashba said you're allowed to move an astrolabe as well as books of philosophy or books of wisdom, science books.
What's an astrolabe?
An astrolabe is, let me see if I've got it exactly right. An astrolabe, I stand to be corrected. I know an orrery. An orrery is like a model of the solar system. You know, you've got those things that like the sun, right? An astrolabe is something similar. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's some kind of scientific instrument to do with the stars. So he says these kinds of scientific instruments and science books and that. The Rashba says you're allowed to move them on Shabbos. The Rambam is not so clear. Perhaps according to the Rambam it would be forbidden. Because the Rambam didn't like people learning non-Torah stuff on Shabbos. Okay, the next one is a clock or an hourglass. Whether it's with sand or whether it's something else, it's not clear if you can use it. And the Ramo says the minhag is that we don't use it. Yes, you know. What would be the problem? It would be, let's see. Because it's considered like measuring time. Now, you know you're not allowed to measure on Shabbos because you might come to write. So it's considered like measuring time.
We had this problem with 30 seconds.
That's the problem with 30 seconds. You got that little timer in the thing?
We got a permission to pay because you're not actually measuring time. You don't actually want to know if it's exactly 30 seconds. You're just using it as you don't actually need it to be exactly 30
So you
seconds.
can use that indicator. You don't have to wait till your watch strikes a minute and then.
That's interesting.
No, to use a watch is different, but to use a 30-second sunglass apparently is different.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, so I would say certainly this kind of straightforward reading would lead it to say that it's Asr, but if you want to say the reason it's Asr is because of that purpose, and it's not serving that same purpose, so that would make sense.
Kind of measuring time.
Okay, good. So now he says, if something is muktzah to the wealthy, it's muktzah even to the poor. For example, he says, Shiare matloniot. Like a rags, right? Or something like that. So the idea is that I am super wealthy, and I've got, once I wear a shirt, like I throw it away, you know, I don't ever wear it again, yeah? So I throw it away, and now it's muktzah, so I throw it in the trash. And then somebody comes and they say, listen, I mean, it's a nice shirt, you know? So they want to come take it on the Shabbos. No, it's already been designated as muktzah.
But then after Shabbos, if they're not like the poor person has to take it, could they wear it the next Shabbos? It's not
Absolutely,
allowed.
because that's
And then
they
it's
are.
muktzah for, I mean, then it's not muktzah for the
There's
rest
two
of
different opinions. Let's say there's two different opinions if this one thing's muksa. According to me, it's muksa and I own it. If you don't hold it to muksa, can you come and touch it?
Okay, so this is a good question in general when it comes. I mean, let's say with Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, you know, in general, how do these things work? You know, can I eat from the Sfaradi kalim where they cook something that I hold as aser? You know, but for Sfaradim it's mutar. Yeah, you keep Chalav Yisrael. Can you eat from my kalim? You know, those are all questions of how to. I mean, there's different people have different answers. It depends on the situation and the ruling. And so it's complicated. Is the answer to your question, Yehuda?
Complicated.
Yes. Okay, chapter number 309. Moving muktzah indirectly. Man's allowed to pick up his son, even though his son's holding a stone. It's not considered like he's moving the stone. And that's when the kid's crying. Because the kid's crying for his dad, and you want to pick up the kid, but okay, so you're picking him up even with the stone. But if the kid is not crying for his father, then you shouldn't pick him up if he's got the stone. And even if he's crying, they permitted a stone, but not money. You can't even hold the kid, if he's carrying money, because what do we say? Maybe when it comes to the maybe when it comes to the money, maybe the kid's going to drop it, and the father might end up carrying it. With the stone, I don't care if he ends up dropping it.
Yeah.
But if I'm carrying him around and he's holding something valuable, let's say a cell phone, which is also a high level of muktzah. A cell phone's probably muktzah machmach siren kiss, which is the highest level of muktzah as well. So the kid's holding a cell phone. So there, if he just leaves the cell phone somewhere, I'm not going to just leave it there. I might be tempted to pick it up and move it.
What about if you pick up the kid specifically because you got the cell phone and you want him to move it to a different room?
I pick up the kid specifically because
Let's say it's in a room where you know it can get stolen quite easily. Are you allowed to pick up the child who's holding it so that...
No, that's dafka with muktzah. Even like a pen, which is not such a high level of muktzah, you're allowed to move it if you want to use it to scratch your back, but you're not allowed to move it if you want to protect it because you're scared it'll get stolen. To move it for itself is the worst level of moving. Just one second, Josh, you heard Anissim.
This is more of an example, but would you be able to move a pen to make space for something that isn't forbidden?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
with the
Pen. Klisham lachli, so you can. You can move it letzorach gufo because you want to use it to scratch your back, or letzorach makomo because you want to use the space, but you can't use it mechama latzel in order to protect it.
Yeah.
What is muktzah?
Yoda.
What's muktzah?
Sorry, it's something when something's very valuable and you would only move it you'd only use it for its intended purpose, not for something else. So the classic example they give is a Mohel's knife. He only uses that for bristles, doesn't use it for something else. But a modern day example is a cell phone. Nobody says, you know what? I can't find the hammer to break these nuts. Just pass the cell phone. I'll just use the cell phone to smash the nuts. You can't. I mean, it's a cell phone. So that's muktzah kiss. Yoda.
What if you want to figuratively kill two birds with one stone?
Mm-hmm.
You need it to scratch your back, let's say.
Yes.
But you're also scared that it's gonna get stolen.
Yes.
So can you scratch your back, and while you're scratching your back, you just casually stroll into the master
Correct. In other words,
bedroom?
once it's in your hand for a permissible reason, you can put it down when you like.
Then your intention is
that's
still
correct.
to, I guess, like a double intention.
Yeah, you are allowed to make that trick with muktzah. Like we saw the same thing, going to sleep in the guest room. Okay, there it needs to be, you'll lose money otherwise. But we do sometimes permit tricks with muktzah. Nissim.
No, I was just there. I wanted to. Is it if you use it? Tiltum and atzad, I think it's called. When you don't use your hands.
Yes, use like a ruler or
Is
something.
that always allowed?
Okay, so there's two different things. There's tiltum and atzad is when you use a ruler instead of using your hands.
Oh yeah, no,
so it's still with your hands, but it's an extension of your hands. So that makes it one step better. Tiltum and atzad. It doesn't permit everything.
This even better?
And then when you're not using your hands, then it's fine. So if you want to move muktzah with your feet or with your elbows or with blowing it or with your head or something like that, that's always fine.
And let's say it's a thing that you usually kick around.
If it's a thing that you usually
Like,
kick
let's say you
around,
usually use your legs.
I don't think that would still be muktzah, but check up on it. Yeah.
But you can't switch off like a light with your
So
hand.
isn't
With
it-
like the
No,
back of
because
your
that's not
hand.
an issue of
That's not
muktzah.
muktzah.
That's a different question. So muktzah is specifically moving around these forbidden muktzah things. Okay. Then you have a basket that had a hole in it. So you put a stone in it to close the hole. So are you then allowed to move around this basket? The answer is yes, because the stone is no longer a stone. The stone is now part of the basket. And it would be the same thing if you have a bucket for the well, which has a stone tied to it. And the idea is that it'll sink into the water, so it'll get the problem with a wooden bucket is that it's going to float. So so you tie a rock to it, so it sinks into the water, so it fills with water and brings it up. So that's not a question of muktzah, because the stone isn't a stone anymore. The stone is now part of the basket, part of the bucket. Okay.
And you need to tie the stone on before Shabbos.
Yeah, exactly. And it's designated there forever. That's part of the idea. And you've done an action. That's the best way of designating stuff. Okay. Now, if you have a basket that's full of fruit, but it's also got a rock in it. So if it's got moist fruit, like grapes and figs, so you should take it out as it is, because if you would tip everything out in order to tip out the stone, you're going to end up destroying all your fruit. But if it's like almonds or walnuts, so then you shake them all out and you shake out the stone as well, and you can put them all back inside. And this is when you only need the fruit or the basket. But if you need to move the whole thing, you can move it, because even though there's a stone, all the other fruits and whatever else kind of take priority over it. If you left a stone, you left a stone over your barrel of wine, or God bless you, or you left money on your pillow. So what you do is you tip over the barrel and the stone falls off, or you tip the pillow and the money falls off. And if it was the barrel was amongst all the others that you're actually not able to tip it off. In other words, it's jammed in between all the others in the row. You can't actually tip it to one side or another. So what you can do is you can lift it up and then tip it, right? So even lift it up with the stone on it and then ending up tipping it. If you intentionally left it there, thinking this is where it's going to be for Shabbat, then you're not allowed to move it. So the example here would be, I took my wallet, Erev Shabbos, with all my money, whatever else, and I said, I'm not going to be sleeping in the guest room, so I'll keep my wallet on the pillow in the guest room. But then, for whatever reason, I have to go to the guest room. So now I want to sleep in the guest room, so now I want to tip it off the pillow. So according to this first opinion, I can't tip it off the pillow, because I intentionally left it there, over Shabbos. Some say, even if you intentionally left it there, you can take it off. Let me put it this way. If you intentionally left it there thinking, I said, look, I'm running late. I don't have time to put this away properly now. I'm just going to throw it on the bed, and tonight I'll shake it off. So the second opinion says, that's fine. Then you can shake it off tonight. It's only if you put it there saying, I'm going to leave it there, that's a problem. Okay. The Ramah says, then even if you take it, even if I put it there with intention to leave it there, so then even if I shake the money off the pillow itself is still muktzah, because that became a basis for the money. Since it's become a basis, you're not allowed to move it the whole rest of Shabbat, and that's really the law of basis, which we're going to come to in a little while. If you put one muktzah thing on top of another muktzah thing, we don't say that the one at the bottom becomes a basis. Wait, beg your pardon? Oh, you put muktzah things on your friend's stuff. You can't make your friend's stuff muktzah against his will. In other words, so Rabbi Liebenberg and I will probably share a room for the rabbinic conference in Israel. So let's imagine it would be over Shabbos, which isn't, but let's imagine. So Erev Shabbos, I leave my wallet on his pillow with the intention it'll be there the whole Shabbos. Then he comes in, I say, sorry, Rabbi Liebenberg, you can't, even if you tip the money off the pillow, the pillow's muktzah because it was made up by sis, whatever. No, I can't do that. unless it's done with his permission. The example again would be, he says, look, I'm not going to be sleeping here tonight. So if you want to put stuff on my bed, you're welcome to. So I put stuff on his bed, but then his plans fall through. So now he comes back and he says, oh, actually, I want to sleep on this pillow, but now's a problem because I already designated muktzah. But that was with his permission. You can't make somebody else's stuff muktzah without their permission. Okay, now we said the general rule is when you want to use the pillow, you want to use the thing, you're only allowed to tip it off. You're not allowed to actually pick it up, because he says that's when you need to use this thing. But if I need to use the place and it's not going to be enough to just tip it off, so then I'm allowed to actually pick up the pillow even though it's got the money on it and whatever else and move it somewhere else. That's chapter 309. Next chapter 310 continues with the laws of muktzah, and there's a expression that you often hear, which is muktzah mechamat mius. Muktzah mechamat mius means muktzah because it's disgusting. Now we've mentioned there's a number of different kinds of muktzah. There's muktzah because klisha melachta isur. There's muktzah because it was designated for saying you can't do on Shabbos. There's muktzah mechamat chisar and kiss. Muktzah because it's too expensive and you don't use it for another purpose. There is muktzah mechamat gufo, also known as eitzim va'avanim, where it's muktzah because it has no utility. So there's a discussion in the Gemara about what's called muktzah mechamat mius. It's muktzah because it's disgusting. Now we already saw the other way around, that some things are dafka not muktzah because they're disgusting, like the chamber pot. Even though it shouldn't be allowed to move it, you are allowed to move because it would be disgusting to leave it. But the question is there such things muktzah mechamat mius? So some of the musar, the halacha is no. The halacha is no. We don't hold for muktzah mechamat mius. The machloket tanaim. Rabbi Shimon says it's fine, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. Muktzah mechamat mius is a real category. Rabbi Shimon says not, and we follow Rabbi Shimon that it's not a problem. Where you'll find musar writers will use that as a concept to discuss. I remember seeing a discussion about reading the newspaper on Shabbos. So even though the Netziv did read the newspaper on Shabbos, there were many rabbis who did not favor reading the newspaper on Shabbos. So Rabbi Eliyahu Lopian, for example, is against reading newspapers. He says, you must not read the newspaper on Shabbos. I'm not talking about the regular weekly newspaper, which is muktzah mechamat mius all week round. I'm saying even the so-called Jewish newspapers you shouldn't read on Shabbos. That was, whatever reason. You should only use Shabbos for Torah or whatever. It's another discussion. But he uses this expression of muktzah mechamat mius, but technically we don't hold for muktzah mechamat mius. That's the point that I want to make. And so therefore it says in Shulchan Aruch, even if you have this stick that they would use to store fish on, you would go fishing, and then how do you take your fish back? You stick them all on the stick, and you take it back. Now that stick's going to be quite a gross and stinky stick. So Rabbi Yehuda would say that stick is muktzah mechamat mius. Rabbi Shimon would not say that if he says no such thing as muktzah mechamat mius. Okay, any food that is edible is not muktzah. We already discussed that a little bit. Now, even if you're talking about bits of wheat that you have sown them in the ground and they still haven't rooted, they're also not muktzah because, in principle, they are still edible. Eggs, also, he says, you are allowed to eat if they are from Erev Shabbos. Talking about eggs that were laid Erev Shabbos. Those are also not muktzah. Again, he goes through a number of other such examples. Like he says, you leave out grapes to turn into raisins, those would be muktzah. And the reason is because they go rotten before they become re-edible. So there's many things that go through that process. Step 1, they're good. Step 2, they're no good. Step 3, they're good again. When it's at step 2, it's going to be muktzah. Okay, then he continues. Some say that this doesn't apply if it belongs to a non-Jew, that it wouldn't be considered muktzah. Okay, next halacha, he says, whether we're talking about saying that's forbidden to eat or forbidden to move, everything that was fine as Shabbos came in, if something bad happened to it during Shabbos, that would make it muktzah. but then it got fixed up again during Shabbos, then as Shabbos came in, it wasn't muktzah, then the default is not muktzah. And even if it becomes muktzah on Shabbos, it could become unmuktzah again on Shabbos. Whereas in whereas if it was muktzah when Shabbos came in, then it's always going to be muktzah over the whole of Shabbos, no matter what, even if you fix the problem. So, for example, with these raisins, and you've got half grape, half raisins, which are gross and rotten. If they were half grape, half raisins as Shabbos came in, then you can't move them over Shabbos. Even if they become raisins during Shabbos and they become lacquer, still no good, because they were muktzah as Shabbos came in. If they were grapes as Shabbos came in, they were edible. Then over Shabbos they become half grape, half raisins, and they're gross. Okay, so you can't move them when they're gross. No, you can't move because right now they are muktzah. But towards the end of Shabbos they become raisins. Now you can exactly. So things can become temporarily disqualified on Shabbos. But if they were not muktzah when Shabbos came in, they can be rehabilitated over Shabbos itself. Yehuda.
Are they actually that disgusting? I can't imagine them being that gross.
No, you can. Have you ever tasted like a grape? You get them in a pack of grapes.
It could depend also on how they do it.
No, Yehuda, that's rotten. That's not drying out to be turned into a raisin.
Yeah. It could depend. It could depend on how they did it, what kind of grapes they used. Could depend on a few things. Well, that's a fair question. It's also on a reality. So that's the example that he gives.
But in the reality, what's the chance you're going to be making your raisins on your roof? So.
Yeah. You heard her?
You don't make
can't things also you said things that become temporarily muktzah on shows. Can't actually come out muktzah for the whole show. It's like let's say something's not muktzah the game show, can it come muktzah on Shabbos for the whole of Shabbos? I don't have an example though, so I don't know really. I'm just like asking.
Say it again.
Let's say something's not muktzah on Shabbos.
I
mean, when Shabbos comes in, can it then be in like an hour into Shabbos just get muktzah for the whole Shabbos?
Yes. Let's give an example with these raisins or figs or whatever else. They're fine as Shabbos comes in, and then they enter into the growth stage, and they end up being in the growth stage for the whole rest of Shabbos.
You can't touch them even though they weren't muktzah when Shabbos came in.
Correct. They became muktzah. Another thing would be if something breaks. Got a beautiful glass goblet in the guest room, so it's not where people are around. I move it around, and I'm busy juggling with it, as one does, right? And I ended up dropping, smashing into 1,000 pieces. Well, all those 1,000 pieces are now muktzah. If I'm worried the kid will come in, so then, the muktzah is waived in order to present someone from it, someone being hurt. You can't. So that would be the example. You want to now make that into a puzzle? No, you can't. It's not muktzah. For the whole rest of Shabbos. Okay, good. Now he says, what if these grapes or these grapes or figs are in a status where some people would eat them and some people wouldn't eat them? So he says, then it depends on what you had in mind. If you had in mind, you said that I'm going to, eat them or whatever, then it's not considered muktzah. And if not, then it might be considered muktzah. But if they're no good and you're like, no, I'm going to eat them even though they're gross, that doesn't help. Okay. If you're not allowed to move it, you're also not allowed to catch it. Because, when I say catch it, even put something underneath it to catch it. So what happens is like this. I have got money sitting on the edge of the table. And I can see it's going to fall off. Because if the bucket catches the money, then that bucket is going to become muktzah. And what I'm doing is I'm muktzahizing a bucket. You're not allowed to muktarize something on Shabbos. It wasn't muktzah when it came in, so I'm not allowed to muktarize it when I'm not allowed to muktarize it on Shabbos. What I could do is I could put the bucket on top of it. Because if I put the bucket on top of it, I could always just remove the bucket. So I haven't muktarized the buckets, then it's no problem. But if you put it over there so things will fall in, that's no good because then you have shkayach. If I have a bed with money on it, or if it doesn't have money on it now, but there was money on it, Erev Shabbos, you're not allowed to move that bed. Because, now again, you have the idea that it became a basis, it became the base for the muktzah, and once something has become a basis, once it becomes a base, then it has the same law as the muktzah itself, And also, once something was muktzah Erev Shabbos, it remains muktzah for the whole of Shabbos. So we haven't quite finished the whole section. We are up to 310, halacha number 7. But that was quite good for tonight, and we will leave it there. Shkach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
3 out of 10 out of.